A couple of years ago, I was assigned to stay on the ISS for a period of time. I got through the training without any problems. It was exhausting, but I knew that the end goal was getting to spend some time in space. I was going up with 2 other astronauts who had previously spent time aboard the ISS. They had helped me in my training, and I considered them friends by this point. We had a meeting the day before takeoff to finalize everything we needed to know. I sat there quietly while making mental notes of everything important that was said. The person leading the meeting turned to me and started telling me that there was something that I had to be careful about. I was confused at first as to what he meant. He began to explain that there will be 7 of us up there, aboard the station, while showing us pictures of our 4 other crewmates. He warned me that these are the only people that I should acknowledge while on the station. I shouldn't talk to anyone else, and if I hear someone outside the station begging to be let in, then I should quickly do a head count before opening any hatches. I stood there with my mouth hanging open as the meeting continued on. I laughed to myself after a few minutes, as I thought that he had just got me with an epic prank. The flight to the station was uneventful, and I was proud of myself for actually making it into space. I knew that my father would have been proud of me, as he had always supported my dreams. I quickly got to know everyone on the station, as we were in very close quarters. I remember gazing down at Earth and was shocked at how beautiful it looked. This was the greatest moment of my entire life. I woke up the next morning and immediately started prepping the equipment I would need for the day. I moved to one of the main corridors and instantly froze as I gazed at a man standing there. His eyes were blacker than anything I'd ever seen before, and they seemed to somehow glow. He smiled at me, and the flesh on his face ripped open so that his smile went from one side of his face to the other. His teeth were bright red, and they appeared to have faces of people screaming in agony. I floated there for a few minutes, while watching him somehow stand perfectly still. One of the other crewmates came by and told me to stop staring at him and move away. I quickly came to my senses and floated away as fast as I could. I could feel his eyes peering at me as I moved away. The other crew members told me not to look at them and just to pretend like they didn't exist. The next morning I woke up and froze in terror, as there were now 2 of these creatures on board, and they were beginning to follow me about. Anytime I turned around, they would be right behind me smiling away. Their flesh had begun to rot, and I could see their insides were full of black slithering mass. I spent the rest of my time on the station, desperately counting the time down before I could leave. The creatures had multiplied, and they wouldn't leave me alone. I couldn't even look down at Earth anymore, as there would always be one of them looking in at me. I was ecstatic when it was time to leave, as I could finally get away from whatever the hell was up here. The creatures seemed to look sad as I prepared to leave, and they began to wave at me as I climbed aboard the shuttle. Their bodies were now so rotted that only the bones remained. I wept tears of joy as I finally set foot on Earth again, and swore to myself that I would never go back to space. If any of you ever have to go to the International Space Station, then don't look at someone who isn't one of the crew members. I'm worried about Adam. Worried was perhaps an understatement. More like downright terrified about his well-being. The few times he had ventured out of his squalor in the last couple of months, a foul stench hung upon him. It was almost like a mixture of dirt and decay. I was almost surprised he didn't have mold growing on him. Like seriously, he hasn't left his room in days, and I'm afraid to go in there alone. You have to help. I figured if anyone could help, it would be Marcus. Mostly because he grew up going to take your son to work day to a meatworks. If he could handle that, he could handle Adam's room. Sure, dude. Figured there must have been a reason you invited me over out of the blue. That makes it sound like I never ask you to hang out. Not at your house, you don't. Fine. Anyways, his room's over here. You could tell which room was Adam's immediately. Not only by the smell, the same horrific scent that followed him around, but by the door. Painted completely black with "Caution, do not enter" tape slapped across it. Fitting for a teenage boy's room perhaps. Less so for a 22-year-old's. Dude, it smells awful. I know. That's part of the problem. My landlord is getting tired of it. But I can't get Adam to come out anymore. So, we're going in? Exactly. My hand rested on the door handle. Cold sweat had started to form along my hairline. My palms too. Part of me figured that Adam was dead, and we were going to be walking in on a corpse. That the stench we could smell was my friend's rapidly decaying body. I soldiered on, pushing the handle and shoving the door open. Dude. Marcus was lost for words. I could see his mouth agape, moving slightly like a fish, trying to get the words out to describe what the hell he was seeing. If I thought a corpse was the worst thing I could have seen, I was wrong. Hell, I wish it were a corpse. Adam was alive, but I could only tell that from the rise and fall of his chest. The room was covered in carcasses of dead animals, some with their flesh still attached, rotting, covered in maggots. The others bone dry. Dirt was everywhere. Soil spread across the carpet. Mud flung onto the walls. And then, there was Adam, laying amongst the mess. Adam? Are you okay? What the hell is this? He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. Eyes fixed squarely at the ceiling. I moved closer to him, even if the smell, worse now that we were in the thick of it, tried to keep me away. I could see now why he hadn't left his room. His skin was melting. It merged with the soil beneath him. Adam was naked, but covered in dirt and blood, and tiny bits of flesh. It was hard to tell what was him and what wasn't. You could barely see his body under all of the mess. Marcus, who had been silent until now, spoke. I think we have to call the cops, man. This is messed up. I hated to admit it, but he was right. I was in way over my head. Adam hadn't even winced at the mention of cops, continuing to lay still, his chest the only movement he made. My hand instinctively went to touch it, wanting to feel the beat of his heart. Instead, I found that there was no skin. There was no heart. Instead, tiny little bugs crawled from out of Adam's now exposed ribcage. My hand soon covered in the insects. Crawling across my hand, white little slimy bodies, and covered in dirt. Damn, we gotta get out of here, man. Shaking them off, Marcus and I quickly made our exit, slamming the door behind us, shutting up the horror we had just witnessed. After we called 911, and a fleet of cops and ambulances soon arrived, taking away Adam, whom the paramedics had confirmed to have been dead for a couple of days, and anything that could have explained what caused his death, though even that was soon confirmed to be ruled suicide by overdose. Soon after this, I moved from the house. I could never get rid of the stench of Adam's room out of my nostrils. The whole building began to smell like it. Even after the cleanup team had thoroughly gone through his room, it wasn't enough. I was haunted by that day. My best friend turned to a chew toy for maggots, all because I didn't see the warning signs. Could I have done something more?